Hello everyone. Sorry we can't be here, but we'll try to make this as entertaining as if we were. My name is Ismail, and with me is Mostafa, and today our talk will be about architecture and melodies, innovative approaches to conservation teaching through music. So, how many have correlated these images with the track that's being played? That's why we are talking about, do we really watch the music or do we listen to the buildings? Music is liquid architecture, architecture is frozen music. That's at least according to Goethe. The research question of this research includes if a musical style is an indication of its era and an architectural style delivers the same message, then both music and building styles should be correlated, that is, reflecting a common rhythm, texture, harmony, proportion, and dynamics. Is there an association between historical styles and melodic flows? Can learners detect an architectural style simply by listening to a pre-composed track that mimics specific musical features? Which of the identified musical features are more important in correctly identifying the association between a style and a melody? And finally, can correlating historical styles with musical genres lead to a better appreciation of the heritage value? So, the methodology looks at 7 architectural styles and they are tested through Kendall's tau b correlation coefficient. Steps for that association is to first identify and explain the features of each style as a work of total art in painting, architecture, furniture, fashion, and music. Second, selecting a list of certain musical melodies believed to be reflective of that style according to a list of common measures between music and architecture. Third, following various class activities in which students become more accustomed with the style, they are introduced to randomly assorted musical melodies and asked to identify what architectural style they reflect. Finally, results are noted and the correlation tested. The goal is to statistically correlate pairs of archimusical measures to associate their visual and audible forms of art, scale, tonality, texture, timbre, rhythm, tempo, forms, dynamic, and intended mood. And now we'll be talking about the 5 elements that are in common between a style, an architectural style, and the music. And to complete this, Aya Mustafa will be taking the mic from me.
So the 5 elements in common are scale, harmony, dynamics, rhythm, proportion. So we try to identify from the architecture point of view and the musical point of view each of these elements. For example, in proportion in architecture, it's the harmonious relation of one part of the building to another or to the whole. In music, it's the strong, regular, repeated pattern of sound, the measured flow of music notation, the distance between notes or intervals that are measured by time. In rhythm, in architecture, it is the fundamental notion of repetition to organize forms and spaces, determined by consecutive time and space intervals, movement characterized by a pattern of elements or motifs at intervals. In music, rhythm is the arrangement of long and short, strong and weak sounds in music. It's about the arrangement of time in music organized in patterns where we respond to it physically and emotionally. That also applies to harmony, scale, dynamics, movement. Another important element in common between architecture and music is the emotional experience. Music, just as architecture, can create an emotional experience to the user. In architecture, it's through the play of scale, color, texture, movement, lighting, and heights. Scale, for example, can provoke wonder, black provokes firmness and fear, and proportion controls the comfort of the user into the space. In music, it's called timbre. It is defined as the color is to visual arts and architecture. So, to have a compatible measure of music in relation to architectural features in specific styles, we have Rococo, Neoclassical, Art Nouveau, Industrial, Bauhaus, International, and Deconstruction styles. So, for example, in scale, as in architectural features, it's intimate. In Rococo, in Neoclassical, the scale is monumental. In Art Nouveau, it's intimate, human scale. In Industrial, it's monumental. In Bauhaus, it's human and monumental. In Industrial, it's human and monumental. In Deconstruction, it's monumental. The equivalent measure in music to scale in architecture is the tonality. For example, texture also in architecture can be compatible to timbre in music. In Rococo, the texture is faint, pale pastel colors. The texture of materials used in Neoclassical are marble, brick. Colors are strong, have a strong contrast. In Art Nouveau, pastel colors are used. In Industrial, steel, metallic. Bauhaus, primary colors, smooth surfaces, glass. In Industrial, glass, steel, gray, black and white. In Deconstruction, it's steel and glass. Also made another analysis in the musical feature for these specific or selected styles. So the musical measures we chose are the tonality, the timbre and texture, tempo, dynamics, and eventually the resulting emotion. So for another example, in Rococo music, the tonality or the scale used in this music is the major scale. The timbre is flute, violins, piano, harp, that create a texture that's called homophonic and transition to polyphonic. The tempo is asymmetrical meters such as 5 or 7s in each measure, and the dynamics are melodious flow, which result eventually a pleasure joy. And that also has similar examples in Neoclassical, Art Nouveau, Industrial, and Deconstruction. So for example, in Deconstruction we can see that the resulting emotion is discomfort, surprise, discord.
So, how did we apply this to our students? Okay, at the first stage, we wanted to test whether students following the designed course initially believe that there is a relationship between an architecture style and melody. And in the second stage, we involved them and we tested their ability to detect the architecture style by simply listening to a preconceived or a precomposed track described as we will see. And the third stage, we wanted to test the hypothesis. Students were questioned on 3 different platforms to find out whether they believe there is a relationship between an architecture style and a melody. And these platforms we used for that were on a Facebook group poll, on a poll website with an extensive post-project evaluation, and the third platform was on a sit-in written exam. Okay, samples from the composed and selected tracks. Let's listen and find out how these tracks relate to the musical style and the architectural style. For the Rococo, for example, this is the track. In the neoclassical, that was the example we used. In Art Nouveau, that's the track. And in the Bauhaus, that's the track we used. Of course, all these tracks were much longer than the sample that you have listened to. The duration is mentioned in the column that you can see in front of you, and the students were not told what style or what musical composition they are supposed to find out themselves. And for the results, first question was, is there a relationship between an architectural style and melody? Actually, we had this before and after. Before the course was introduced, 68 of students did not think about any relationship between architecture and music. Only 20% believe that such a relationship exists. And as the course progressed, that percentage grew to 70% by milestone 2 and reached 87% at the end of the course. The second question was, can students detect the architectural style by simply listening to the pre-composed track? When students were made to recognize a particular style by listening to random tracks, the results actually differed a lot. The following figure that you can see on the right hand side of the screen shows the percentage of those who actually successfully recognized the architectural style. And you can notice that Art Nouveau and Industrial were the most recognizable ones, followed by Neoclassical and International. The result of these are shown in the figure, show that timbre and the overall compatibility were the two most significantly associated variables in explaining the success of the style recognition, both according to Kendall's and Spearman's coefficients. As timbre is defined as the quality and taste of sound, the same as color and texture is for architecture and art, it is the distinct factor that can reflect and affect a mood from another. So the most recognizable styles based on the study are Art Nouveau, Industrial, Neoclassical, International, Bauhaus, and Rococo. Actually, some of them were not recognizable, and that raised an important question. Failure to recognize a certain style was somewhat puzzling. It probably means that the student was unable to capture the association between the style visual features and the track's audible feature, and this means that either no association exists between the music track and the style, or there was a failure in delivery, failure to communicate the style. The question that are raised by that is that, was the track not reflective enough of the style, or was the style itself too vague to capture, or was there a deficiency in delivering the actual meaning of the style during the lecture, or was it simply a sample size? The answer actually seems to be found in the concept of abstraction. The literature talks about abstraction as simply implying that the most complex situations, a mind leaves things out and associates based on the most salient feature of the phenomena in question. A mind doesn't actually capture every single detail and its breakdown of that feature. In both music and architecture, the tested features were selected based on the literature to be tonality, timbre and texture, tempo, dynamic, and the resulting emotion. So, as each of the style is originally created according to the emotional and cultural environment people lived in, Timbre is an effective tool in composition. For example, piano and flute were commonly used in Rococo, reflecting the optimism, the joy, that mood of the people lived at the time. Another example is the industrial area where emotions of machines, mass production, brassy instruments were more commonly used. Okay, Aya now will finish up these parts.
Also, the geometric analysis between musical and architectural measures. In Art Nouveau, the dynamics gets gradually softer as the melody plays. In Gaudi's Casa Mila, the windows gets gradually smaller, solids and voids in each floor. Rhythm can be seen in the solids and voids in elevations as measure of time for each note. Timbre can be seen in colors and textures as example of this in the flat timbre in modern music that can be reflected in the primary colors of Bauhaus or in the brassy timbre of industrial that is reflected in the use of steel and cast iron. So we made this analysis and we will talk, for example, on the Art Nouveau. So in each of these we have the scale and the feature. So in music the scale is used the minor scale, which is a softer scale and somehow melodic. The scale proportion in this minor scale is usually goes as 1, then half, then 1, 1, 1, then half, then 1, 1. If we look at the proportion in Casa Mila, we will find almost the same proportion of 1 to 1 half repeated in the whole elevation. Also the dynamics of music, it gradually gets softer upward, and this is also can be noticed in the size of windows and the orientation of these windows on overall the whole elevation of Casa Mila. Also the rhythm, it can be very seen here in the elevation, and the timbre or the color. In Art Nouveau they usually use ceramic tiles, stained glass, and the description of tone or timbre, it's usually warm or vibrato. The same can be also noticed on each of these styles. For another example, in Rococo, the musical scale used to be a major scale. It's known that the major scale is the scale of joy, and that was also the mood of the era of Rococo.
So, in conclusion, Goethe wasn't entirely correct when he talked about that architecture is frozen music and vice versa. The structure of a musical track is very similar to the design of a building if the dimension of time was considered, because you don't look at an elevation with a time dimension the same way you listen to a track in which time is always concealing the next part of the track. Architectural experience, just like a musical melody, are both a journey requiring an intro, an entrance, a body, transitional element, and an outro, destination. Even from the exterior and the urban point of view, the facade is a note, and the block is a note. So whether we walk through or walk out or walk by the building, the journey is a track. So a style is a collection of notes that form a melody, so a student may capture the essence of a style by seeing so many buildings of the same feature. If the association with the melody, if associated with the melody, then the brain the brain connection is made. This is equal to this. Those that get and those that don't, so it's a receptor. Some factors are more effective in delivering that connection to the receptor, such as timbre, as it gives a distinguishing taste to one style from another. The mental association, however, cannot be missed. Thank you very much. We leave it at that, and you can have a look at our research paper as it's published, and we will also associate a number of videos that were made linking both the style and the musical melody that's associated with them as the student reflected on it. Thank you very much.